Alright, we're up in the grain tank at the combine right now. I decided to go ahead and tear into this a little bit at least tonight. So what we're doing, I've got auger trough liner kits, I think you would call it. So basically some stainless pieces that will go underneath this horizontal auger that pulls the grain over to the unloading auger. So you've got, you can see kind of the big tube under there. I don't know if it'll come out exposed right. That goes up, and then an elbow goes back for the unloading auger. So all the grain that's in this side of the grain tank has to get pulled over that way, and that's what these horizontal augers do. And we had a hole in the floor, actually more in the sump, so like kind of underneath about that area, 2 years ago, or a year ago, a little over a year ago. So last harvest, not the one we just finished up, but the one previous, and put a patch panel in there. There aren't any holes through the bottom of the grain tank yet, but since we've already had a hole there, I'm guessing that probably it's not too far behind. And the augers, especially the front one, is starting to get sharp on the flighting. So the spirals that go around here are starting to get sharp, which means they've worn down, where we're losing diameter on the auger, and will continue to wear down more quickly at this point. So I want to do something about that, and since we're going to have them out of there, that's the perfect time to kind of shore up that floor area. And from what I've heard, the stainless kits are pretty much a permanent fix, because stainless is pretty hard and abrasion resistant. So even though it's fairly thin metal, will go for a lot of hours. And I haven't even opened up the package, to be honest. I got the kit in January, I think, because I got it on sale on some winter special stuff. But it should bolt in, I think. I don't know if there's probably some holes that we have to drill for rivets or bolts or something in this intersection. But I know that it bolts in underneath existing holes, at least on the ends. So I think that's going to be some of the grain sump, or the sump for the unloading auger. When I was up here looking things over, I also noticed we've got some wear down in here. So I kind of want to look that over. There you can see the hole where it's got the patch panel on the outside. So it doesn't look like it really has gotten very much larger. Not a lot larger, at least, in the last year and a half, or harvest and a half, but there's enough grain that goes along this end of the grain tank that I'm expecting it's probably getting thin. So I wanted to look that over pretty closely. So basically the agenda for this evening, I'm going to pull these cover shields out and get where we sort of have access to stuff, and can see down into that sump and see if there's any other areas that are going to need work, and kind of figure out what the game plan is going to be for that, whether we try to do it this winter or wait until preseason next fall. But wanted to at least get the process started, since everything's pretty well shined up from having grain in it this year. I mean, the combine gets stored inside, so it doesn't get really rusty, but it is humid enough that you end up with kind of some surface rust and stuff, and would rather avoid having a bunch of crap underneath those stainless panels. I think they'll go in nicer while everything is clean and shiny. And from what I've heard, I think we also need to pull this panel out to get maybe both of those panels to get this cover out. I'm not sure exactly about that yet, but we did have a little issue. There's a pulley behind this little door here that's attaches to a shaft and a gearbox that we've had some kind of minor problems with, and want to kind of take a look at that. It might be getting to the point where we need to take that gearbox clear off and pull the shaft out and put a new one on. I crawled up here with a battery impact wrench and wrench, some sockets and a few wrenches. So we're going to kind of pull a few things apart here and see what we've got. Probably going to need both hands, so I'm not going to take video for a little bit, but once we get things apart, I'll try to give an update. And one other thing that I noticed when I crawled up here, we're getting real thin on this auger tube, which I knew we were sort of starting to get a little bit sharp on the edge, but it seems like it's actually pretty thin a ways down, because where the chute hooks on that aims corn over into the corner of the grain tank seems to have bent up. I don't think doesn't look like it would be hitting yet, but definitely is getting pretty thin, and that high spot is going to even wear faster. I don't know if you can see, or if I can get the camera up here in a different spot, but the carriage bolts that hold that bracket on, the heads are about half gone on. Well, we got the back cover off, and we lack one bolt of getting the front cover off. I think what's going on, so over on this end you can kind of see there's a cutout here on the bin wall. So there's a thicker plate that the bearing attaches to that bolts in. So the way that this was set up, the bolt went in from this side on the back side of that cover piece. And I'm pretty sure there's like a star washer in between this piece on the outside of this hole and then the sheet metal side. And I'm pretty sure that this one on the front is spinning. And at the moment I haven't come up with a good way to get things pulled tight where I can get that to hold to turn the bolt. And of course that's the one bolt that I can't get the impact wrench on to spin very fast, so I'm having to use a flat wrench combination wrench on it. So not sure how I'm going to get that, but it'll probably come eventually. It's a little thin piece of metal, so it shouldn't really be holding on as tight as it seems to be, but I already tried kind of beating on it from the outside to try to pop the bolt through, and that didn't seem to work. So looks like it might be a project for tomorrow at this point, but you can see kind of how these are going to come out. The augers drive off of the other end, so over on the left side of the combine, so that would be kind of behind where the cab door is and like the platform and ladder and everything. There's sprockets on this end, chain drive that goes around the end of the grain tank there, so that stuff all has to come off the end of the shafts and pop the collars off of the bearings on that end. And then I think the directions are to take the bearings off here, but I might actually be able to leave them on the way it looks, because these have individual panels on the outside here. So I think if I just take the bolts out, I might be able to just pull that whole auger and bearing and everything straight out. I might try it that way at least and see if I can get it. Probably I'll end up making more work for myself, because that's usually how these things go, but that's where we're at. One bolt separates us from getting done what I had wanted to do tonight, but such is life. Alright, it's Wednesday, December 11th, and we're back out here working on the combine again. Going to try to get the augers out of here and finish getting the shields or the covers off the top side of them. So basically, the way that this whole thing works, there's a hydraulic cylinder back here at the back that, when you turn on the unloading auger, moves this whole arm right here down and tightens up the belt inside that big pulley, or shield with the big pulley. So to get the stuff off, these two big pulleys here are the ones that we have to take off to get the augers where we can pull them out the backside, which doesn't look like will be too bad. There's a snap ring on the outside there, and then set screws, and I believe there's a bearing inside there that has kind of a 3-bolt flange, I believe, that goes onto this kind of metal piece behind everything here. That probably there will be a lock collar that I have to pop off with a punch, but it shouldn't be too bad. Mostly I'm going to have to loosen up this tensioner up here to get the chain where I can pull the connecting link out. This chain was new a couple years ago, so there's a connecting link there, I believe. So we'll take that loose and just let it hang, and then take off these two pulleys, and that should allow us to pull the augers out the other side, hopefully. Well, I thought I was going to be able to get these sprockets off the shafts without needing a puller, but I can't get it all the way. I did take and use some emery cloth, which is like sandpaper for metal, and kind of took the paint off of the end of the shaft there. If you never messed with this type of stuff, you probably wouldn't think of that, but having a paint layer can really cause problems with getting stuff pulled off when there's a tight tolerance between the hub and the shaft. But I can rock it back and forth, and was able to get it worked out part of the way, but I kind of stopped, and it seems like it's probably going to be faster to mess with the puller. So basically I've got everything set up. I'm just going to put some tension on here, and then it should just pull the sprocket and the hub off of this shaft nice and easy, hopefully. I don't want to pull too hard because I don't want to booger up the teeth, so I might have to kind of tap it with a dead blow hammer or something like that to get it moving also. And I mean, I can, like, the way that it was rocking easily is opposite the way that the puller is on here, so I'll have some ability to get tension on it and then rock the gear back and forth and let the puller tension pull it out, hopefully. And fortunately, not because I've been spending a huge amount of time on this project, but I did get pulled away to do some auto repair and a couple other things. But have got the sprockets both off, as well as the lock collars. So for a lot of industrial applications, the bearing will have one of these collars on it. If I can turn the thing here. This lip on the inner race of the bearing is machined in an eccentric pattern, so you can tell it's kind of thinner, like right in there. And the reason for that is so that you can use one of these lock collars to secure the shaft to the bearing, to make sure that it's not like that the bearing or the shaft isn't turning inside the bearing, so that the bearing is always turning when the shaft is turning. And there's a set screw, and then a notch that you use to hit it with a punch, basically, to tap it around to pinch the shaft into the bearing race there. And the front one came off without too much trouble. The back one, the set screw, was super tight. I think probably some of this maybe was assembled before the combine was put together at the factory, and that maybe is causing some issues with paint being stuck in stuff. But eventually was able to get it. There's a trick where you can take just a small center punch and put it down inside, so like smaller than the hex, and then whack it a couple times with a hammer, and that'll sometimes break them loose, which it was still pretty tight after I did that, but that maybe helped a little bit. Howdy, it's January 24th, and we're going to work on the combine a little bit. Lizzie is here helping today. Hopefully, I'm not sure if I'm going to get this totally, if I'm going to get the grain tank liners completely done today, but I'm hoping that I can at least get a decent dent put in it. I think at this point it's not going to be too bad to get the actual stainless pieces installed, so we'll see. But I'm down at the farm mostly for other purposes. I'm getting some seed and fertilizer and chemical stuff figured out for this upcoming spring, and just have a couple hours to work on it. Kind of in the way, you know that? So this is what we're putting in. They're basically formed stainless steel pieces that will go in the bottom of the grain tank underneath where the augers pull the grain across towards the unloading auger. It's actually fairly heavy material. It measured about a 1/16 with a pair of calipers, but it actually looks heavier than that. Usually stainless is pretty hard, so I'm hoping that this will be a more or less permanent fix, or at least last for as long as I own this combine. We'll crawl up here, so looking across the grain tank, basically it's just going to go from about here over to about here. That's where most of the wear is, where the grain's getting pulled across, and then goes up the auger over there, and out to the truck or wagon or whatever we're unloading onto grain cart. So I've got some bolts to loosen up here and a couple on the other side, and then we'll kind of clean this out. All right, so we're up in the grain tank right now. This is over on the left side. You can see the cab, back of the cab there, steering wheel and such. So right in here is where the unloading auger, the vertical section goes up, and then it curves back, so there's kind of a notch there where it tucks back into the grain tank. This is where we're putting the stainless panels in. And this back one, I think I might have mentioned it in a video when I was originally starting to tear this apart, but the reason that we're replacing it is there's some spots here that are just starting to crack, and it's probably where it's welded underneath. I don't know exactly what the structure is on the bottom, so I think that's probably over top of the straw walkers and kind of not the most fun to get to. But it's probably getting thin enough, and then when the combine vibrates or whatever, you're getting cracking like of the sheet metal versus where it's welded. And there's several spots here on this back one that are just starting to get like that. which are not a problem right now. Right there you can see exactly where the weld is, or I can see where the weld is. I don't know if it will show up well enough on the video or not. But basically I want to try to get these stainless panels in before we get so thin that things start really falling apart and leaking grain back down into the separating system of the combine. You can see there's this metal piece here that created a nice ridge, which is worn off, very smooth. But the way that these new ones fit, if it's not too dark on this front edge, they're kind of notched around so that it'll sit down flat once we put the pop rivets in the back here. But then it overlaps the boot part there where it wears on the bottom, so that the metal that's left there now should stay there. It'll wear on the stainless instead. So basically the process is I've got these carriage bolts in just loose right now, but I'm going to go put nuts on those, and then it should kind of pull this down into position, and then we'll come along and drill and pop rivet the stainless panels in. And I'm a little bit fortunate in that a few years ago for another project bought this fancy pneumatic pop rivet gun, so that'll be a lot easier than having to use a manual one to put those in. I think there's like close to 100 of those rivets that hold down the edges. So you kind of put these bolts in and get them finger tight so you can get the stainless down tight against where it needs to be against the boot and everything there, but be able to kind of move the stainless panel, and you square it off of this seam to make sure that you're in there at the right orientation, which probably I'm guessing is more so that the next panel butts upright than that it actually matters if this end is off a little bit. But I've got the first rivets put in here, so we've got those kind of staked so that they're parallel, and then it's set to drill in the middle and then kind of alternate filling in. So we're going to drill a hole through here. And they were kind enough to provide a stubby drill bit of the right size, which I think is actually like a number 12 or something like that, so probably a little bit bigger than the actual size of the pop rivet. But then we just go like so, and we're tied down. So basically I just need to do a whole bunch more of those. It said to do kind of the back line first and then do the front line, which I'm not sure how that's going to go because it seems like it's a little bit like it's bent in more than it needs to, or like, I mean, it would have started as a flat panel, so it's kind of overbent to fit into the trough here. But I'm hoping I can just kind of stand on it and get it tight to drill those holes and put the pop rivets in. But I've got these two ready to go in, and hopefully this part shouldn't take too long at this point. And I think that this end will be easier because those carriage bolts, getting the nuts on the bottom side of those is kind of a pain because you have to reach around all of the mechanism that drives the unloading auger and everything. Howdy. It is March 2nd? Yes. And I'm back down at the farm getting some things ready to go. Hopefully gonna start putting on a hydrous later this week, but it's too wet right now and had a few things to wrap up. Got the tractor all put back together probably 3 weeks ago or so, with the exception of a few minor details. We added a vent line straight out the engine because the filter contraption that Cummins put on some of these seemed to be causing problems and getting excessive crankcase pressure. However, that kind of screwed up the space where some of my auto steer hydraulic lines ran. So a lot of the project today, I guess, was kind of getting that stuff rerouted in a way that worked. We ended up moving a line that was up front back behind just because there's a lot less space back here with that hard line to keep things, or to get things routed without having them rub and cause problems. And then got some of the heater hose that was protecting things, just so that the hydraulic hoses don't rub through or rub on anything. I'll put back on and everything's zip tied together, and I think we should be pretty much good to go on this. The next project that I'm working on is getting the RTK stuff all working with the auto steer. We got the auto steer running last year, however, it didn't get the RTK stuff set up, so we're gonna try to modify a cable to plug into the receiver up here on the top, and basically it's we're going to use the Iowa DOT RTK network and use a data connection through a cell phone and then Bluetooth to serial to actually get the correction into the paradigm. So that's kind of the next step, and then hopefully we'll have some opportunity to test that a little bit tomorrow and have a few things to go through on the anhydrous bar as well. But basically I just need to add a wire into this cable to get power to the Bluetooth serial device, which I think is sitting over here. And then hopefully, I'm sure there will be a few kinks to work out, but then be able to do RTK with that. The other thing that I've been working on here lately is some stuff on the combine. So the auger that loads the grain tank, so like the clean grain, after it's been separated from the chaff or corn cobs or whatever, goes up this elevator, and then there's an angled auger that goes up into the grain tank. Probably not going to be able to see too much right now, but right up through that hole is where the gearbox used to be. And the pulley that drives that whole system, or the auger specifically, I guess, the pulley into that gearbox had some issues. It's kind of the ones that they used on the earlier 9000 series combines had a half moon key with a set screw, and then there was sort of like a washer and a bolt that kept it from totally falling off if things worked loose. But when you're putting a set screw on a half moon key, you're sort of like, cocking that up in there, and the whole system seemed a little bit cheesy. And you can kind of see that this one worked loose, and it never stopped turning, but definitely boogered up the shaft. And since we sort of had stuff torn apart, wanted to actually get that fixed right. So we have an updated shaft, which I forget if it was sometime during the 70 series they changed these, but instead of having a straight shaft on the end there with the half moon key, they went to a taper so that you have a more positive coupling between the shaft and the pulley, and then the threaded piece on the end there you put a nut on to kind of hold that all tight, which seemed like a much better system. So I got all the bearings and stuff when I was working on it last week, however didn't have the shaft in stock at my particular John Deere dealer, so they had to order that in. But the gearbox is over here torn apart and under plastic at the moment, but we got the new bearings put on the one shaft, and then the shaft that I got new is going in this hole, so there's some bearings and stuff to be put on that, and then the cover that's on the bottom right now gets sealed on there, and have some torquing to do on the bolts to get them the proper tightness, and then hopefully we'll have that ready to go back in here pretty soon as well, or kind of depending on what happens weather-wise, if I'm able to get into the field sooner. Definitely the priority is getting anhydrous on, but I also have some side projects with the combine and a few things to finish up on the tractor, and a few maintenance things that I need to do on it too, just greasing the front end, and need to change the oil sometime, although I probably might run a little bit of anhydrous to kind of make sure that we didn't knock any dirt, or like kind of get the engine warmed up and get the oil circulating around before I change it, since we had the valve cover off here recently. But that's basically where we're at on stuff. Once I get all of that done, or depending on how I come along on the combine stuff, hoping to get at least the big stuff put back together on it, then have some things to get ready for planting this year, also some planter maintenance to do, replacing opener blades and a few other things that if I can get a good day when it's nice and cold out, we'll just do that in front of the shop. We don't really have enough space to fold stuff out inside the shop here, and usually it's easiest to just do it on the pad out there on a nice sunny warm day, which hopefully there's going to be more of those coming. But that's where we're at on stuff. We'll try to do video when interesting things are happening.